Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leith and here are today's top stories. All 16 and 17-year-olds in the UK will be offered COVID vaccines within weeks, and they will not need the consent of their parents. Residents in Athens start to pick up the pieces after wildfires left houses and businesses devastated.
I feel bitter. Who wouldn't feel like this? You can't understand the feeling unless it happens to you.
And a return to working at the office flags mental health concerns among employees. We speak to a senior advisor on workplace relations. All 16 and 17-year-olds in the UK will be offered jabs against the CCP virus. Ministers have accepted the recommendation from government advisors to extend the vaccine rollout to younger age groups. It comes as the latest figures show more than 9 in 10 adults in the UK are likely to have COVID-19 antibodies, with levels continuing to increase in all nations and regions. The presence of antibodies suggests someone has had the infection in the past or has been vaccinated. NTD's Trevor Piper brings us more on the vaccination rollout to older teens.
Experts on the Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunisation have advised the government that the COVID-19 vaccine rollout should be extended to include 16 and 17-year-olds. At a Downing Street press briefing, committee chair Wei Shen Lim said children in that age group will be offered a first dose of the Pfizer vaccine, which has been approved for use in the UK for people aged 12 and over.
We would like to advise that the first vaccine dose is offered now for 16 and 17-year-olds who are otherwise healthy, with the aim of a second vaccine dose to be offered sometime later.
Vaccination experts have yet to set out the timetable for delivering the second doses and will make further recommendations later. Ministers have accepted the recommendation and the NHS is making preparations to start offering the jabs to around 1.4 million children in the coming weeks. Under current UK guidance, children will not need the consent of their parents to get a vaccine. Officials are not ruling out vaccinations for healthy 12 to 15-year-olds, and England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer Jonathan Van Tam says he thinks it is likely they will get the jabs.
My sense is that it is more likely rather than less likely that that list will broaden over time as data become available.
At present, children over the age of 12 are only eligible for a vaccine if they have certain medical conditions which put them at risk from COVID-19. Research has shown that children who get infected with the CCP virus are unlikely to become seriously ill or suffer from long-term effects. Researchers at King's College London found that less than 2% of infected children have symptoms lasting more than 8 weeks. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
Residents in Belarusian, Greece face another night away from home after wildfires left houses and businesses in the neighbourhood badly burnt. Over 80 fires burned on the island in 24 hours since late Monday in the worst heat wave for 30 years. NTD's El Rhodes brings us this report.
On Wednesday morning, residents in the Athens suburb of Vasilobi visited the aftermath of the wildfire that burned their homes, cars and businesses. This resident said he didn't know how his house was spared when others were not so fortunate.
My next-door neighbour's house was burnt. The house over there was burnt. The house behind mine was burnt. I don't know how God helped me, and mine was not burnt.
His neighbour sees the damage to his neighbourhood.
I feel bitter. Who wouldn't feel like this? You can't understand the feeling unless it happens to you.
The worst heat wave in over 30 years saw 81 wildfires break out in Greece throughout Tuesday. Homes burned and residents fled as wildfires raged on the outskirts of Athens. More than 500 firefighters and 18 aircraft battled a blaze 12 miles north of the city centre. Electric pylons, trees, houses and cars were in flames as residents were ordered out of their homes. Athens' power operator says the fire damaged parts of the grid, posing a major risk to the region's electricity supply. Greek authorities say a mixture of high temperatures, low humidity and strong winds caused the fires to spread rapidly.
All this resulted in multiple rolling air currents carrying an intense heat load that fanned out inside a densely forested area, and in this way the wildfire created its own microclimate and spread dangerously.
A time-lapse video shot by National Observatory of Athens shows plumes of smoke filling the sky as the blazes increased towards nightfall. Apart from the fire north of Athens, two more major forest fires were still burning Wednesday morning, one on the island of Evia and one in the southwestern Peloponnese. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
The Chinese regime has lodged a stern representation with the BBC over its reporting of the recent floods in central China. It also dismissed the BBC's allegation that foreign journalists had come under attack in the country. NTD's Trevor Piper has the details.
The Chinese regime on Tuesday accused the BBC of misrepresenting the recent floods in Henan province. It said the broadcaster harboured ideological bias and double standards. Henan was badly hit in last month's devastating floods. The regime said on Monday 302 people had been killed and 50 people remain missing. But local people have cast doubt on the official figures, saying the real death toll is much higher. The Foreign Correspondents Club of China said last month that journalists covering the floods were harassed online and by local residents. Some even received death threats. The local branch of the Communist Party's youth organization asked its 1.6 million followers on Chinese social media site Weibo to report the whereabouts of BBC's Shanghai reporter. The BBC issued a statement saying Chinese authorities should take immediate action to stop attacks on foreign journalists. But the Chinese regime said the BBC was inverting black and white and smearing and attacking China. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
And in other news, people are returning to offices after lockdown restrictions lifted. But a survey suggests a quarter of workers feel they are not coping. Workers in London are suffering the most, with 40% saying their employers do not provide enough support for their mental health. NTD's Neil Woodrow speaks with a senior policy advisor with ACAS, who work with employers and employees to improve workplace relationships.
According to a survey by online health provider Lime, around 43% of employees said they would start looking for a new job if their employers do not do more to support their mental well-being. The message from the government is now to get back to the office. On Tuesday, Chancellor Rishi Sunak, in an interview, Link News said, "We've kind of stopped saying that people should actively work from home and have now left it up to businesses to figure out the right approach. In terms of a return to work, in keeping with everything else that we are doing, it's been gradual, it's cautious, it's careful, so there will be a gradual return back to the offices." Sean Williams, chief executive and founder of Lime, said the past 18 months has had a huge impact on people's lives, including on their mental health and resilience. He said the long-term repercussions of the pandemic are likely to be felt for years to come. I spoke with a senior policy advisor from ACAS regarding his perspective on the current mental health situation facing employees and employers.
So obviously the pandemic has been a huge change for the whole country. And I think people found it very stressful at the beginning, particularly with at one point there's 40% of people working from home, I think, in the country. So that took a lot about change, getting used to. And we know from our survey of our own staff in ACAS that they struggled a bit at the beginning, but the more they did it, the more they got used to it.
He said the urge to rush staff back to the office has its dangers for employers.
I think that's why hybrid is appealing to lots of employers. It facilitates an easier transition, one that's safer, and that maybe listens a little bit to some of the new values and the new experiences people have had over the pandemic and their employee preferences.
Rishi Sunak yesterday also cautioned against allowing remote working to become the norm.
And he also mentioned about the training of staff on site is better, and the sort of ability to work together and to communicate. Do you see any aspects of that? Can you comment on that at all?
Preservation has always been about productivity, really, and we know that's a big challenge for the economy now as it reopens. Managers are often, let's face it, a bit distrustful about whether their employees are going to be as productive at home with all the distractions as they would be in the office. But I think research, new research is proving that wrong, that people do feel they can do just as good a job. And in fact, I think they value the job autonomy. If people have a choice in how they do their job, that's a big driver of job satisfaction and productivity. So I think minds are changing on this one a little bit.
I asked Wakeling for a response regarding the Lime survey data that shows 40% of London employees say they think their employers can do more for their mental health.
Yeah, I mean, the mental health situation has been described as a shadow pandemic, really. And I know the Royal College of Psychiatrists sort of described it as a tsunami waiting to happen. So it is a real genuine problem. I certainly think that the lessons we've learned about the importance of well-being during the pandemic need to be listened to by employers. Maybe in London it's particularly difficult with the commuting and so on, and the concerns over safety. And anecdotally, people say they've had a better lockdown if they've had the luxury of being in the countryside with gardens and so on.
He said at ACAS they see mental health at work as a joint responsibility.
Individual has to try and develop coping strategies, which I think they have done during the pandemic. Managers have a really important role as, looking after that duty of care for their staff, having those conversations, which can be harder to do that remotely. But employers, there's a big take for them to take it seriously and make sure there's every change they introduce, there's a mental health sort of consideration to that.
In February, 37% of employees said they were solely working from home, compared with 34% who were travelling for work. At the end of last month, 20% of people were working from home and 50% were working fully in the office. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
Still to come, a German court fined an 84-year-old man over £200,000 for illegally owning a World War II-era tank. That and more after the break. The Belarusian sprinter seeking refuge in Poland left Tokyo today, but for Austria. It adds another twist to a saga in which she sought diplomatic protection at the Olympics. Kristina Tymonovskaya had been scheduled to board a flight for Warsaw. The Polish government offered her a humanitarian visa after she refused to board a flight to Belarus against her wishes on Sunday. But instead, she took a flight to Vienna, where she was met by the Austrian State Secretary. A member of the Belarusian community in touch with the sprinter says diplomats changed her flight due to security concerns. And in other news, dozens of people gathered on Tuesday outside the Belarus embassy in Ukraine to commemorate a Belarusian activist living in exile who had earlier been found dead. Some say they fear for their safety now. NTD's El Rhodes has more on this.
A Ukrainian police chief on Tuesday said an exiled activist from Belarus, who was found hanged in a park this week, had injuries to his face, knee and chest. Police are investigating whether Vitaly Shishov's death was a suicide or a murder made to look like a suicide. On the same day, about 300 people gathered outside the Belarus embassy in Kiev to commemorate Shishov. Many were wrapped in Belarus opposition flags. They chanted slogans like, "We will not forget, we will forgive." Many were Belarusian citizens who had fled to Ukraine. Some expressed their suspicions that Shishov may have been killed unlawfully and say they fear for their safety now.
Those who came here used to feel free because they managed to flee from the regime, to avoid imprisonment and criminal persecution. But now we see that we can be killed here.
When I recall the events before the election last year, it seemed that it could not be worse. But the occupants of Belarus bring bigger and bigger shocks with their actions. The scariest thing is that they fight against their own people, against Belarus citizens.
Shishov's girlfriend told the Associated Press that she doesn't believe that he could have killed himself. Shishov was an outspoken critic of the regime in Belarus and led a Kiev-based organization that helps Belarusians fleeing persecution. His group also staged opposition events. A close friend and activist says Shishov told him recently he felt threatened.
He called me in the middle of last week and asked me to look after his girlfriend if something happens to him, and said that he had a bad feeling. That's all he said. I tried to ask more. He said that he simply had a bad feeling.
Ukraine has become a haven for Belarusians during a crackdown on opposition by President Alexander Lukashenko, following a disputed election last year. Lukashenko has vowed to continue what he called a mopping-up operation against activists, whom he has denounced as bandits and foreign agents. Tens of thousands of people have been detained, and leading opposition figures are either in jail or living abroad. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
A court handed a German pensioner a suspended prison sentence for keeping a legal military arsenal from World War II at home. His collection included a working tank. NTD's Trevor Piper tells us more.
A German court on Tuesday convicted an 84-year-old man of illegal weapons possession. His personal arsenal includes a Panther tank, a flak cannon and multiple other items of World War II-era military equipment. The court in the northern city of Kiel handed the man a suspended prison sentence of 14 months and fined him for over £200,000.
As defence lawyer, I am very satisfied with the verdict, because the trial chamber agreed with the defence on the essential points that also characterised these proceedings. Namely, the tank that was the subject of the proceedings, i.e. the Panther, the anti-aircraft gun, the torpedo and the mortar, were not weapons of war, but rather museum objects.
The court also ordered the defendant to sell or donate the 45-ton tank and the anti-aircraft cannon to a museum or a collector. Authorities discovered the illegal military arsenal during a raid on the collector's storage facility in northern Germany in an investigation into black market Nazi-era art. Local media reported that the man made no secret of his weapons collection and even brought the tank out during a bad winter to use as a snowplow. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
German prosecutors this week charged a German-Italian woman with espionage on suspicion of being an informant for Chinese intelligence for several years. They say Clara K. is the wife of another suspect, Klaus L., who was arrested on suspicion of espionage last month. The indictment filed in a Munich court says the couple allegedly passed information to Chinese intelligence in exchange for paid trips and money. Prosecutors said the information was primarily gleaned from high-ranking political contacts made through their work for a think tank. Heavy rains and severe frost threaten as much as half of the grape harvest in France's famous Champagne region. The severe weather is forcing producers to dip into their reserves. NTD's Costemenes brings us this report.
Third-generation champagne maker Maxime Toubar is having a difficult year. Torrential rain hit Europe in July, causing deadly flooding and damaging several farm products.
What we've seen this year with this rain gauge, which is not very big, is that it is often full, and we sometimes have to empty it several times a day.
France's Meteorological Service said Champagne saw the second wettest June-July period since records began. About 25% of Champagne vineyards have been damaged by mildew fungus caused by the rain, adding to severe losses caused by frosts earlier in the season. Fungus attacks the grapes and causes the leaves to dry up.
We had weather that was unfavorable to the growing of grapevines. We had a lot of rain these past 2 months, 300 millimeters of rain, even though we're in a period that should be hot and dry. The grapevines now need sunlight. They need to be dry. They don't need rain.
Half the harvest may be lost, but there should be no impact on supply to the market thanks to reserves. Toubar manages 12 acres of vineyard and his colleague Frank Joubert looks after nearly 10.
We can't save them all. When there is so much pressure, we do what we can, but it's also partly luck. We can't put the grapevines in tunnels. Next year, I will have to fill up this reserve again, and I am crossing my fingers, that only this year is like this.
Both will have to dip into their reserves next year to make up for the losses. Costemenes, NTD News.
Back to the Olympics now, and national houses are important at every Games. They're the places where a nation's sports community come together to celebrate. But this year in Tokyo, things are a little different. NTD's Our Roads brings us this report.
From the outside, the building looks like a 19th century library. This is the National Hospitality House for Italy's Olympic team, also known as Casa Italia, a showcase for the country's art, design and fine food.
We bring with us all our history and try to combine with the Japan style and the Japan history too.
Casa Italia is located in a district about 6 miles from the Tokyo Olympic Village. Spreading over 20,000 square feet, it features lounges and a games room on the ground floor. A restaurant headed by an Italian chef takes most of the second floor. Due to pandemic restrictions, the house is only accessible to those who are vaccinated, with temperature checks mandatory for visitors.
It is normal. There is few people, not a lot of people, but we have also the CEO member and the president of Italian Federal Sports and everything. So it's a bit less festive, but it's important to be here now to send another message that we can go on.
Back at the 2016 Rio Olympics in Brazil, Casa Italia welcomed 500 people daily. This time they expect only around 100 a day. Elsewhere in Tokyo, the French Olympic House, or Club France, is also less than full. The manager says there won't be any partying this year. Medal-winning athletes will be interviewed in a TV studio inside the house.
Here in Tokyo, we do everything for our athletes to feel as good as possible. But there is no mixing with the public, no celebrations with athletes' relatives.
France is next in line to welcome the Olympics, with the 2024 Games set for Paris. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
Staying in Casa Italia, when Italy's high jump gold medalist suffered a major injury 5 years ago, doctors said he may never be able to run again. But a miracle struck in Tokyo this year. NTD's Joy Duguid brings us this story.
In 2016, athlete Gianmarco Tamburi broke his ankle days before the Rio de Janeiro Games. But this year in Tokyo, everything was different. On Sunday night, draped in the Italian flag, he hugged everyone he could find after his high jump gold.
It was a magical night. I was waiting for this so long. After that injury in 2016, I passed through many problems, and I never gave up. I always believed it was possible yesterday to win that gold medal. Many times I couldn't sleep in the night. I cried alone in the bed, and it was just very difficult to come back from that injury.
Speaking at the National Olympic House of Italy, Tamburi says he came a long way from his injury to clinching gold in Tokyo.
The doctor who surgered me in the first time told me, "You will be lucky if you can run again." And I came back, I jump again, and then I jump again with the top athlete in Italy, and then in Europe, then in the world, and now I'm coming back with again with the gold medal in the Olympic game. That's just, I think, it's an amazing story to tell.
Tamburi agreed to share gold in the men's high jump with Qatar's world champion, who finished level with Tamburi. Faced with a potential jump-off to decide the gold medal, Tamburi calmly asked the official, "Can we have 2 golds?"
2 is better than 1. If we could do 3, even better.
The official nodded. The athletes hugged before running celebratory laps of the stadium. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.